Welcome back to Sort of Sattva. I'm Veronica Page, here to help cut through some of that confusion caused from the wellness industry so we can feel confident to choose what brings sustainable health and happiness. I was so sick I had to hide from the world until I discovered Ayurveda, a holistic healthcare system indigenous to India that continues to help people heal from seemingly incurable conditions. But I quickly learned it can be messy out here, y'all. From the coaching space to popularized and commodified wellness. So what really transformed my life was learning from some of the best Ayurvedic doctors, but also gaining the capacity in my own nervous system to discern, to follow my intuition and make the behavioral changes I needed to make every single day. Sort of Sattva integrates Ayurvedic principles, somatic relational healing, and conversations with others who are working to move forward in their field in a sustainable and holistic way. Together, we can strengthen our confidence and our intuition to choose what is really going to lead to happiness, health, and becoming truly successful, like F-U-L-L. So, if it feels true to you, I invite us to pause and take a deep breath. And let's drop in. Hello, I am so excited to get into today's topic. It is a big one. It saved my life, and I'm here to share as much as I can on this topic. We're going to talk about what is Ayurveda and how can we use it? How can we honor it and do so in a good way? A legal disclaimer, very, very important. All information here is intended for educational purposes only. My friends, this information is based on Ayurvedic principles. It's not intended to substitute any provided advice or direction from a licensed healthcare practitioner. My role as an Ayurvedic health coach, a Swasta Acharya, is to provide educational support so that you can discern and make choices with a licensed medical physician. It's important to always consult with a doctor before making any significant changes to your regimen, okay? Okay, cleared up. Now, this means if we're here for educational purposes, we get to arm ourselves with knowledge, then let's step in with curiosity. What does Ayurveda actually mean? If you've never heard this before, Ayurveda is one of the oldest continually practiced healthcare systems known today. Originated in present-day India, also known and referred to as Bharat. If we break up Bharat in Sanskrit, Baha meaning light and Rata meaning engage in. This is signifying a land devoted to knowledge and light, and those within it are the bringers of light, the bringers of knowledge. Sanskrit in and of itself is the classical language of Southeast Asia. It belongs to the Indo-Aryan branch of the Indo-European languages. So it's one of the oldest languages that is still practiced today. I also want to be very clear that I am not a Sanskrit scholar. I've taken some Sanskrit introductory courses, but my Sanskrit is elementary at best. For all of you Sanskrit scholars out there who want to drop in and share some wisdom and correct me, I welcome it. I would be grateful. So Ayurveda is one of the oldest continuously practiced healthcare system known today from present-day India. We can also refer to present-day India as Bharat. India also has ancient roots. It's derived from the Indus River. So Bharat and India can be found in very old scriptures, but there's an ongoing debate, some advocating that Bharat is the soul name and citing that this is a historical, cultural significance if we view the land as India due to the colonial legacy of India. So I'm very curious about your thoughts, your opinions, or your discussions around Bharat in India. Now, when we come back to Ayurveda, the Sanskrit term, breaking this up, Ayur and Veda, Ayur meaning life, and Veda meaning knowledge, science, and Ayus means lifespan. So we have Ayu, life, longevity, Ayus, lifespan, Veda, truth, knowledge, science. So if we can see what this Sanskrit term means, then we can piece it together and understand that this is the science of how to live a life. This is the science of how to live. This is the science that's understood that no two people are alike, and yet we're made of the same building blocks. So we can scientifically deconstruct understanding these building blocks and also understanding how a person is in their life to recognize, is it going to lead to health or disease? So we can understand Ayurveda as almost like a user manual. So Ayurveda is learning the building blocks of a healthy body for the self through our seasons changing, through the environment. So let's break it down again. Okay, this is a lot. Ayurveda, Ayu, life, longevity, all the things that are in life, Ayus, lifespan, Veda, truth, knowledge, science, put it together, the science of how to live a life. And so Ayurveda is dedicated to bringing this user manual through the texts, through a trained physician, Ayurvedic doctor, so that we can learn how the building blocks of a human existence here on this planet leads to health or disease. And to continue down this understanding of what Ayurveda is, we can refer to one of the major works in scientific literature, which is a Samhita. And the Charaka Samhita is one of these texts that brings a lot of the scientific wisdom that's used still today in Ayurveda. This text is 2,000 to 3,000 years old, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that later. So in this verse, this shloka is a line of Sanskrit poetry or prose. It typically has a rhythm to it, which is really helpful for memorization, but also it provides almost like an artistic framework to this scientific work. So we have a shloka from Charaka Samhita Sutrasthana, Chapter 1. This is the volume of core principles of Ayurveda. You can find this on Charaka Samhita online. It's almost like a Wikipedia almost, that's consolidated from many, many Ayurvedic doctors, qualified doctors. We'll get to that too, the qualified doctors discussion. But this shloka, to essentially explain what Ayurveda does, what Ayurveda is aimed at. It goes, hita ahitam, sukham dukham ayustasya, hita hitam, manam cha ta cha cha, yaroktam Ayurveda sauchate. And what this shloka, this line of poetry, tells us is that hita, what is good or appropriate for an individual, ahita, which is inappropriate for an individual, sukham, that which creates contentment or general satisfaction, dukham, that which creates discontentment or general dissatisfaction, ayustasya hita hitam, and all of which is appropriate or inappropriate to an individual for quality of life and duration of life, can be measured, which is manam, can be measured and explained in terms of characteristics and functions, which can be explained cha to cha cha yaruktam by Ayurveda. So it is told, sauchite. Okay? So that which is good or appropriate for an individual and that which is inappropriate for an individual, that which creates contentment, that which creates discontentment, that which explains all of which is appropriate and inappropriate for the quality and duration of life. Quality and duration, not just duration. The quality can be measured and explained in terms of characteristics and functions by Ayurveda. So it's told. That's what this shloka explains to us. What is Ayurveda? Again, this user manual, what's good and not good, appropriate and inappropriate for an individual. That which creates contentment or discontentment, all of it's explained in Ayurveda. How it's measured can be explained in Ayurveda, is explained in Ayurveda. But that also means you got to choose and do it. You got to be a part of the conversation. You got to be a part of experiencing it so you can choose. Here's all the information laid out, what creates contentment or discontentment, but then being able to choose it. Do I create a life of contentment or discontentment? So that's quite a lot, right? Just overarching framework, what Ayurveda is. If you don't understand what it is, still put it in the chat text conversation box. But for me, this was so critical, this body of wisdom. And so I'll share a little background about me, why it matters to me. I was born with chronic eczema. I was born with a lot of physical pain, digestive pain. I was colic. The skin inflammation continued on till I was an adult in life. It went on and off. And I would constantly be told by doctors, more allergy shots, skin biopsies, more steroid creams, and internal pills, light therapy, daily light therapy. So many modalities that just led to little to no result. And then I reached a point of no return. There was a point I remember distinctly. I was with my sister and my mother, and I was crying. I was in so much pain. We were on a road trip together, and I remember laying on my side in bed, weeping, and trying to be as quiet as possible, recognizing I was far from the person that I know I am. I felt so disconnected from the person that I was. I played in my mind the times in New York where I was hiding on the subway, and I thought to myself, and now I'm hiding from my family, and I've always been the bearer, the bringer of joy. I always thought I was always joking around. I was always high energy, and all I wanted to do was hide and disappear. And in that moment, my sister came to me and she said, we're going to find a way. We're going to figure something out. I couldn't do more things. I was so tired. I was so done. And I said, I'm done. And she took it upon herself to look at alternative medicines, alternative practices. And first it started off with traditional Chinese medicine, TCM. And I just have to say, in that moment when she took the reins to walk me home, in a way, to walk me into more possibilities, there was just enough surge to keep going, just enough hope. And so I dove into a system with TCM, with a doctor who told me more about food and what I should and shouldn't eat based on the characteristics of this animal. And it was very interesting. I was giving herbs. The herbs were helping me. I was getting a little better. But then I plateaued. And I'm not saying traditional Chinese medicine doesn't work. I think it does. And I'm sure there are incredible traditional Chinese medicine doctors. I don't know this science well at all. But I'm sure it's fantastic. It's another holistic system that's just not in my wheelhouse to discuss. But I did plateau. For me, there was a point where the doctor I was working with said, hey, I think we should pause, we should stop, let this sit for a little bit, and then come back to it. So then I was well enough, I had enough energy to do my first yoga teacher training. And in this teacher training, learned a little bit about Ayurveda. And I feel like this is such a common experience with people who work with me. They say there was a short discussion about Ayurveda and something felt real. Something lit me up. Something was like, oh, there's like a remembrance here. It's like I know it, but I don't know it. So this is what my experience was. There was an excitement, there was a hope glimmer, and I needed to know more. I needed to learn more. I needed to experience more of whatever this was. I felt an urge to get curious about how my body experiences life through the sense organs. I was curious about this life science. And what it did for me in my eczema journey, in my health, it required me to slow down and get curious about what I was feeling, what signs and symptoms I was experiencing, what qualities I was experiencing via the sense organs that take in information and require digestion through all of the different sense organs. And that was new. So what I noticed in this practice of, okay, slow down and understand my experience was I started to notice where my energy was inconsistent. And what I mean by that, my energy being inconsistent, was yes, throughout the day, yes, in the choices that I made, it felt unclear. I wasn't directionally clear in the choices I was making. And in that lack of consistent energy, I felt like I needed to grasp because I'm not sure exactly what I should eat. Let me grasp on 1,000 different supplements. Let me grasp onto 1,000 different modalities of teaching. Let me grasp to just find something because I don't have direction. I didn't feel the direction. And then that grasping, because I'm taking in so much, led to getting more sick. So what Ayurveda did is had me recognize, oh, it's not just about the information and the herbs and the foods. It's about experiencing them through me. I had to experience something. Are we getting this? This matters to me so much because I got to experience my eczema and experience the pain fully, not numb it out. And in experiencing it fully, I had a better understanding of it. I had a better understanding of, this eczema is hot, it's itchy, it stings, it burns, it oozes, versus, oh my gosh, I'm just in so much pain and my life is a mess and I'm never going to be happy and I have to hide from the world or I'm not going to make it. Now I'm in a curious place. Which slowed me down into, okay, I gotta breathe. I'm feeling hot. I'm feeling the ooziness. I'm feeling the itchiness. It's not dry and it's not flaky. So I started to get curious about these signs and symptoms and explore them with a practitioner. My doctor at the time, Ayurvedic doctor, Jessica Villala, my Ayurvedic practitioner, she got me curious about what I was feeling, slowed me down, validated that this makes sense of what I'm feeling and how can we move forward with it instead of, okay, this is what I'm feeling, let's numb it down. No, now I'm understanding the itch and why the itch is occurring. Now I'm understanding the journey of all of my signs and symptoms, which helps me slow down, and I get to slow down with someone who's listening. Shout out to Jessica Villala, perhaps one of the best Ayurvedic doctors, BAMS, to support Westerners through chronic conditions. And I'll link her information in the show notes, of course. We'll have her on another podcast, on another episode. So Ayurveda took me from feeling completely hopeless and wanting to hide from the world and loss of self to understanding myself and how I relate to the world through signs and symptoms, through my senses. It gave me the agency to make choices and to understand why these choices might make me feel a certain way. I learned the user manual to my health. Yeah. Shout out to Ayurveda. Yeah. And it's the reason why I'm here. It's the reason why I'm here having a chat with you and have any energy to do so. So back to what Ayurveda is. So Ayurveda is a living science. This is why I get a little bit annoyed by the term ancient wisdom. Yes, it is ancient wisdom, but for me personally, that sounds like it's past, it's old, and it's outdated. Ayurveda is a living, breathing science. It has been practiced for thousands of years, potentially since the beginning of humankind. So it has continued to be practiced and continued to receive data without stop and continues to be practiced today. So to me, this idea of an ancient science, an ancient tradition, just doesn't work for me. Yes, it is, but it's also very much alive and well today and hasn't stopped being practiced. Yes, it has been fragmented and it's had to mobilize around India, around Bharat, because of colonialism. And yet it has still continued its practice. So that means we have data. We have data since the beginning of written text, written literature in India, the Vedas. So we have the Vedas and some of the oldest texts known to humankind, like the Rig Veda, which is about 4,000 years old. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but 4,000 years old. And the Ayurvedic texts, like Charaka Samhita I mentioned, 2,000 to 3,000 years old. And then, don't get me wrong, even before these texts were written, we have the science being passed down through oral tradition, being heard from one another. Shruti, to be heard, this oral tradition was probably passed down since the beginning of being able to support health, even if language didn't exist, Sanskrit didn't exist, written text didn't exist. So we have to acknowledge that Ayurveda is a living science, but it's also fragmented knowledge. Over the past 700 years, due to colonialism, Ayurveda has been fragmented, which is one reason why it's been very hard to prove or to showcase or to make credible this incredible body of science, of wisdom, because of the fragmentation. India, Bharat, is one of, if not the most invaded country known today. India has been invaded so many times over the past 700 years. Muslim dynasties and empires, European invasion, Portuguese, Dutch, French, British, Danish. British colonialism didn't end too long ago. Specifically in 1947, that's actually less than 100 years ago from when this is coming out, 2025. That's 78 years ago. That's not long at all from when India gained its independence from Britain. So not only is there fragmentation in terms of the classical literature, the texts, the doctors that had to flee and find a safe haven to practice medicine, not only is there fragmentation of the text itself and thousands of shlokas missing, and Vaidyas and doctors who were ripped from their homes and had to find elsewhere to practice. But there was also this indoctrination that Western medicine is better. There was a forced ideology from Britain that Western medicine is superior to indigenous medicine. And so this forced indoctrination is not only in the Western mind, but it's also been ingrained in the minds of Indians. So there's a lot of unlearning to be done here. Just wanted to put that piece in there. So on top of this, fragmentation, missing pieces of the scientific literature, and yet we have a science, a holistic healthcare system that is healing people all over the world. So I say this is important because one, it's an ancient wisdom that continues continues to be practiced and has continued to be practiced for thousands and thousands of years, potentially since the beginning of humankind. And we must be very discerning on the fact that there are missing pieces. Okay? That also gets to be acknowledged, and why we require integration in a good way, in a curious way, with an open mind and an agency in the self, knowing of the self. In other words, if anyone is telling you that one way is the only way, if anyone is telling you that they have all of the answers, that this science, whether it's Ayurveda or something else, veganism or whatever, if anyone's saying that this is the way, the only way, and every other way is wrong, and this has like all of the answers, the complete answers, everything is here, I would just be very, 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 very wary. I would be very, 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 very careful with that, personally. So we must be discerning. Even the Sanskrit texts have only been translated to English over the past 200 years. When these texts, for example, again, Charaka Samhita, 2,000 to 3,000 years old, and Sanskrit in and of itself being more than 4,000 years old, and these translations to English are just 200 years old, which tells us who's translating them, first of all, right? For what benefit? While also leaving out a whole bunch, right? For example, like how would one do open cadaver surgery? This is what my Ayurvedic doctor would say. How are we doing open cadaver surgery thousands of years ago without some kind of like anesthesia, right? Cue in certain medicines that are not discussed in the literature that we see today. Whole other topic. So be discerning, right? And understanding that the way it's practiced today, and because of British colonialism, there's very much still the idea, the belief in India as well as in the Western world, that Ayurveda is for barbarians, is for those with less money, right? And those with less money in the capitalistic society is seen as less than. So that means that would bucket or overcouple Ayurveda as being not as good, right? So it is a decolonial process to honor and work with indigenous medicines, with respect, with knowing, with right relations, with integration into what we need in this modern world to move forward. That said, I'm not calling down Western medicine. I love Western medicine in some ways. I just understand that it's not complete. It's a reductionist system, which we'll get to in another episode of reductionism versus holism. So I think Western medicine is necessary and required for a lot of issues, challenges that we have today in the modern day. And it's not the whole picture. And for someone like me, who was constantly not receiving what I needed to receive from Western medicine, this works for me. This worked for me. So if you feel that same way and you're getting curious, cool. Chop it up. Get curious. Dive in. Learn more. More about Ayurveda. What are the common misconceptions and commodifications that we see in Ayurveda today? So what is Ayurveda not? Ayurveda is not a system that has zero side effects, okay? Ayurveda actually runs on side effects, runs on a piece called lakshanas, which is understood as like the signs and symptoms that we're experiencing, the side effects. So Ayurveda actually works best when we feel and understand the side effects. And so a proper Ayurvedic physician, a Vaidya, can understand where the pathology is going, where the disease is going, where it's localized in, and what it's connected to, and how much the body can work with certain formulas that are put in. Because the formulations or the herbs, the Ayurvedic medicines, will then change our physiology and show different side effects. So it's like all about side effects, actually. So just because it's natural doesn't mean there are no side effects. Crazy. What else? Ayurveda is not a practice that requires one to be practicing Hinduism. So you don't need a certain religious affiliation to be practicing Ayurveda or to try it out. There is an understanding that one that has faith, has a belief system in their own right, that believes in something greater than themselves, then that is a sign of good health. And that is a sign of being able to achieve our goals more seamlessly. But we'll get to that. Ayurveda is not a system requiring one to be vegetarian or vegan. That is a misconception as well. That storyline came from the age where Buddhism was very strong in India. And in Buddhism, the principle of ahimsa, do no harm, was popularized, of course. And this led to being vegetarian, being vegan. So a little more from me. It is, in fact, completely opposite from classical literature that Ayurveda is for vegetarians, for vegans. Pre the Buddhism, the Rasha Shastra period, they were eating all kinds of animals, and it is logged, it is mentioned for several pages what the effects are of these animals that we wouldn't eat today. However, it wasn't commodified to eat these animals. Rather, everything was seen to keep the body in either equilibrium, homeostasis, or as medicine. And because it's a holistic system, it must be done with honor and recognition of how having the animal affects the whole. So it was recognized that we must consume sustainably. So let's get to that. Meaning it would be contraindicated to eat so much meat or so much of an animal product if it's going to lead to deteriorating earth, lead to deteriorating the whole or an ecosystem. So it's embedded that if I am sick, that I get to and am advised to have what is going to heal me, which might very well be animal based. But if having that animal based in certain quantities or the way it's prepared is harmful to the whole, then it is contraindicated. And that's not just in the case of animals. This is in the case of plant life, of herbs. So there's always a little bit of nuances, or a lot of nuances. Ayurveda is also not eating for your dosha. The concept of doshas, the regulators of the body, that will be discussed in a whole other episode. But Ayurveda is not a practice of just eating for your dosha, meaning you eat a certain way and you don't eat a certain way. You don't eat this food and you do eat that food all the time. That is definitely not what Ayurveda is about. It's not about dogmatic principles or dogmatic rules. It's about something much deeper and much more alive in the moment. Ayurveda is not about expensive skincare products. Far from it. That's, again, commodification. And in simply fragmenting Ayurveda, oh yeah, it's an oil or it's a massage, that in of itself reduces it down, and thus, if it is in a reduced form, it's just this, then it is no longer whole. It is no longer holism, and Ayurveda is a whole medical healthcare system. It works on holism, not reductionism. So if I say Ayurveda is skincare products, it's oils, it is inherently not that. It can't be. Using Indian spices, also, not Ayurveda. It's not about doing yoga. Yoga is more the practice of liberation, the practice of liberating from all human duties, which is kind of where Ayurveda leaves off. Ayurveda is very much a body-based, human experience-based system. It's a science of life, living a human life, of which will lead to liberation, lead to potentially the liberating from the human experience, the cycle of death and rebirth. But that practice of liberation is actually more involved in yoga. But again, we'll talk about that more later. So it's not about just doing yoga, but doing yoga can be very helpful. Or doing a similar practice to yoga of which has philosophy in it, which has multiple limbs. That's not just about movement, but can involve movement, asana. So it's also not about wearing clothes from India. It's not about changing your name to an Indian name or attempting to adopt or assume a foreign culture. Actually, this is the antithesis or the opposite of Ayurveda. So if any Ayurvedic practice or any other system of care, quote unquote, says, hey, you need to adopt another name or a foreign culture outside of your own, I would run the other way personally. Ayurveda can't be reduced to sellable products and treatments. And if that's what you thought it was, it's okay. You're not alone. This is what consumer capitalism does, is commodify. So here we are learning about a whole system. Now, again, if all of these things are what Ayurveda is not, what it is it's about personal awareness. It's about being aware of how we experience the qualities, like I mentioned, and the effects of food and nature and its surroundings on my human experience. It's a cause and effect medicine. Okay, remember those signs and symptoms, like very real. What are my signs and symptoms? What is the effect of what I just did, ate, place I went, person I conversed with? It's a experiential medicine, like I mentioned in my own journey, what I learned, it changed my life. It's an experiential medicine, meaning it has to be personalized to my current experience. And because it requires me to engage with my senses and connect the senses to what my intellectual experience is of life through these senses. Okay, that's what Ayurveda is. It's experiential medicine, which is also why, as a Swasthacharya or an Ayurvedic health coach, the change aspect is so important. And why I trained in somatic relational trauma healing, because this experience of life through the senses, experiencing instead of numbing, is very much in line with Ayurveda, especially in a modern world that's becoming more and more non-body based. So this is our ability to come back, that remembrance that was there, that remembrance that people hear and feel like this is true, but I don't totally get it. It's just because we haven't practiced it. But Ayurveda is inherently a practice system. So the last piece about what Ayurveda is, it's a system that prioritizes digestive health so you can achieve your goals. It's a system that prioritizes digestive health so you can achieve your goals because if Ayurveda is about living life in this human body to the healthiest of its capacity, then that means to keep me alive, I need to digest. Digest what? Everything I take in from food, which then becomes my tissues, which becomes my bones, which becomes my energy. And also digest life, experiences, trauma, conversations, ideas. So Ayurveda prioritizes the digestive system so we can then move forward and achieve our goals, the goals of a human life, which we'll get to. So this is why our digestive system is so important. It is the ability to digest or the inability to digest that leads to how I can perceive the world through my senses, how I can move forward, or if I'm in pain or uncomfortable. That which creates contentment, that which creates discontentment. I don't know about you, but I'm content when I actually have a bowel movement, and I'm not content when I don't. Holding on, inability to digest and let go. That's deep, y'all. It's deep. And I know you get it. So what are the different types of Ayurveda today? There are many different types of Ayurveda today because of fragmentation. And you can take a look at Modern and Globalized Ayurveda. It's an incredible book. I will link it down below, where it discusses these different kinds of Ayurveda. We have the New Age popularized mainstream Ayurveda, which talks about the doshas and reduces things down to things that we would buy or treatments typically. And it's pretty rooted in a fragmented piece of Ayurveda, such as Rasayana, which is the regenerative, more longevity treatments and therapies. This is where we use a lot of oils. However, going straight to this like juiciness, the regenerative tissue treatments might not be the proper sequence for someone, especially someone that's dealing with some chronic illness. However, if we go straight into that, but the body needs to let go before it creates more juiciness, more regenerative tissues, then we kind of just, again, mask, feel good, dopamine hit, serotonin hit. So these are like the spa treatments, the oil treatments, but it might not be the proper time and sequence to have that yet. So that's the new mainstream popularized Ayurveda. It has its place. It's a great place to start to get people excited. And then there's Maharishi Ayurveda. Maharishi Ayurveda is very specific and interesting. It is rooted more in transcendental meditation. Maharishi understands and coins this idea that transcendental meditation, a very specific type of meditation, is what the baseline for health is. And it starts actually there and in the mind. Maharishi Ayurveda is the only form of Ayurveda that does not recognize any other form of Ayurveda as a practice. But TM, Transcendental Meditation, is not a part of classical literature. It's not a part of classical Ayurveda. It is something that was brought forward. What I find interesting about Maharishi Ayurveda and Transcendental Meditation is that Maharishi intended the healing to all be centered around Transcendental Meditation, TM, which does come from Vedic traditions in India. However, this technique of TM then attached Ayurveda to it. So Maharishi Ayurveda is really a transcendental meditation medicine. And Ayurveda was just added onto it. The reason for that is, to be debated. I mean, if you ask me personally, I feel like if it really is TM that's the most important piece to healing, then why would we need to add Ayurveda to it? Because that's really what it is. It's a TM, transcendental meditation-based medicine, and then they added Ayurveda to it later on. So that's a whole other practice, Maharishi Ayurveda. And then there's classical Ayurveda based on classical literature. There's Charaka Samhita, Sushruta Samhita. Sushruta is the father of even modern surgery. He is an Ayurvedic doctor. There's Ashtanga Hridayam. There's Bahava Prakasha. Multiple Ayurvedic classical texts. And this is classical Ayurveda. They utilize classical literature to a T. And then there's globalized Ayurveda, integrative approaches, which utilizes classical literature but understood in a globalized context, because classical literature is derived from observing and testing Indians in India. And if we're going to practice classical literature in a globalized perspective, then it would require us to have integrative approaches. So that's the practice that I continue to study and that I believe can be a core pillar to where holistic science can be today. Are y'all still with me? We're doing great. So one thing that intertwines all of these different types of Ayurveda is recognizing how pivotal the digestive health is to our overall wellness, longevity, and capacity for healing. So Ayurveda really does prioritize digestion for achieving our life's goals. Digesting everything so we can achieve our goals. So a couple of prerequisites and fundamentals of Ayurveda from the lens of the digestive health would be understanding the fundamentals of how digestion becomes stable and strong. This means creating healthy, stable routines right? Again, all of this is based on Ayurvedic literature, Ayurvedic science. Creating healthy, stable routines will help with our digestive health and beyond. Integrating basic principles of nutrition, right? So this can be around, macro and micronutrients, but also around timing and portion and simplicity and cooking principles based on seasonality. Seasonality is huge. What can my body digest based on its strength or weakness in its current environment, which includes the seasons and current environment of my inputs and my outputs and my stress levels, all the things. Digestive health fundamentals also includes rest, proper rest, and that's a whole other topic we'll talk about as well. But also temperature regulation, recognizing, do I have the ability? Is my body able to regulate temperature? What's my thermoregulation like? Is it strong? Is it weak? Aligning physical activity to, again, the seasons, to my energetic capacity based on probably my rest and other things, including nutrition and stress levels. And finally, mental activity. Ayurveda recognizes that our mental activity is going to influence our digestive health as well, because our body is a vessel that contains a certain amount of blood in each moment, and the blood has to go somewhere to focus on something. Yeah. And if I'm overthinking, I'm doing a whole bunch of work right after I eat, my blood is being distributed every which way and not centralized to my digestive system. So these are some of the prerequisites to Ayurveda digestive health before personalized, like highly personalized treatment, which this highly personalized treatment is really where an Ayurvedic physician, a Vaidya, comes in. Then the Vaidya can come in and reprogram physiology, bring the physiology to baseline or better, and really uproot the dysfunction or the disease. And this is done through a couple different ways. It can be done through herbal formulations, like, herbs and treatments. And it can be done through a deep cleansing process called panchakarma. This is a 5 cleansing detoxification protocol, 5 actions, pancha, 5, karma, action on and through the orifices of the body. So there are different ways that an Ayurvedic doctor can support these highly individualized programs. Highly individualized. Very different from other systems. We'll talk about panchakarma another time. But this is an overarching protocol or steps. You can think steps of practicing Ayurveda. We need the baseline fundamentals, like I mentioned, to get digestion on track, healthy, stable routines, a drumbeat of the day, circadian entrainment, right? So a schedule, integrating the basic principles of nutrition, rest, temperature regulation, which also means dress properly, y'all. Dress properly for the seasons. We don't want to be all cold all the time just so that we can look cute. If we're cold and we're getting goosebumps, we have vasoconstriction, this is going to prevent digestion from being at its peak. So dress for the seasons, please, especially during those transitional seasons. Aligning our physical activity based on the seasons, based on our energy capacity, our food, and mental activity. Have a practice in harnessing the mental activity and streamlining it so we don't have so much overactivity that's draining our energy. And then we would go into, an Ayurvedic doctor would support in some deeper, highly personalized treatments, perhaps panchakarma, the 5 cleansing systems, the 5 detoxification processes or procedures in India for chronic illness and for simply vitality. And then we have the regenerative longevity therapies, best done after panchakarma or after some years or months of digesting the disease through formulations, again with the support of an Ayurvedic doctor. And then maintaining balance. Ayurveda also means we get our agency back to learn how to be prepared every time I'm out of balance, I'm out of whack. Every time the seasons change and I'm starting to feel a little off, and I know how to shift my diet, my lifestyle, my clothing, my rest, my workouts. Knowing how to restore that health is a key aspect of Ayurveda and is a key aspect of longevity. So this is all part of the knowledge of how to live a life, the science of how to live a life. It includes you. It includes your knowing. Okay. So what are some simple self-assessment tools? Simple self-assessment tools for checking in on your digestive capacity. So checking in on those fundamentals, right? Which is a good place to start. Some questions that one can ask ourselves if we want to explore Ayurveda and want to get in touch with ourselves and our inner knowing for longevity and for direction each season and direction each moment. Some questions that I can ask myself is, okay, well, let's just think a little bit logically right now. A little bit logically. How late did I sleep last night, or how early did I sleep? How am I waking up? Do I wake up feeling heavy? Do I wake up feeling light? Do I wake up feeling ready to go for the day? Right? Asking these questions that in its inquiry makes me pause and learn about myself. If I can remove some of the judgment and just go into, I want to be the scientist of my own body and my own life, and then I can partner with an Ayurvedic doctor or a Swasacharya, an Ayurvedic health coach like myself, and bring this information to someone else so we can look at it on a broader scale and see where I might be sticky or might be missing something. It will first require us to know the self more, to know the self as deeply as we can. So check in. What is my schedule like? Do I have loving self-discipline around my meal times? Am I eating within the same hour each day, or roughly around within the same hour each day, to create that drumbeat of sustainability, a rhythm? So these are some of the questions that we can ask ourselves when we're diving into a practice that's rooted in holism, that's rooted in a whole picture of who you are. Self-inquiry, self-assessment, curiosity without the judgment. And if the judgment is really hard to let go of, then we inquire about that too. So yeah, this does take time. This takes patience. And whatever you need to do to get to that, maybe it's rest, maybe it's sleep earlier, maybe it's lowering the caffeine, coffee before 12, green tea before 4, so that I can have more agency to slow down and self-inquire. Did I have a bowel movement today? Oh, I didn't. I wonder why. Okay, I did have a bowel movement today, but it was liquidy or it was painful. I wonder why. Curiosity, and then we gain more and more capacity to know ourselves. And it's not only knowing our signs and symptoms, but it's what led to making the choices that created those signs and symptoms. The constriction or the fears that led me to need to do something like overeat, to the point where I'm so full and now I'm so heavy and lethargic and I have to take a nap outside of the good time to take a nap, which is like summer. So that's my invitation. Simple self-assessment tools. Get curious. Have a journal about knowing the self. Start with your energy levels. Start with your bowel movements. Start with the qualities, your emotional level, your ability to slow down, and what might influence those things. Now, Ayurveda versus conventional medicine. I think it's pretty clear how Ayurveda and conventional medicine differ. But if we just break it down a little bit more, the biggest difference is really the goals of each approach, right? Conventional medicine aims to get people to a state of pathology, a state of disease, into a state of being less in pain, feeling okay, symptoms going away, right? Not actively flaring. There's a control to target those symptoms and make me feel better, right? It's less aimed at this full vital self or state. Of course, there's a new movement that's been out for a bit now, this biomedicine with longevity, right? And this is really a beginning. It's in its infancy, right? This longevity medicine, which is very exciting. And Ayurveda has longevity built in. The full vitality of the self is part of the goal. Ayurveda defines health as being in a state of vibrancy, going beyond the absence of disease. In fact, classical literature will give signs and symptoms, signs explicitly of what health looks like, signs that I'm in good health. This is a very helpful place to start as well. Do I experience the sign of health through glowing, radiant skin and complexion? High levels of resilience. Being resilient when I get sick, I can easily come back to health, or I know how to do that and bounce back quite quick, right? High levels of physical capacity and strength. Mental fortitude and high stress tolerance. There's the contentment and satisfaction that we mentioned before. So I feel contentment and satisfaction first thing upon waking up in the morning. I'm ready to get out of bed within 10 minutes and go and take on the day. These are signs and symptoms of good health. And if I don't experience this, then that might not show up on a lab test. We also have interesting descriptions, which I love, of health leading to these goals of a human life. Once in a healthy state, we'll have access to wealth and success, like what successful means to you, right? But that also includes financial wealth, financial success, and social success, like connections, successful relationships, and a high degree of luck. And these are said to be outcomes of Ayurvedic work and Ayurvedic treatments. I'm like, okay. Health is that which leads to, supports me in X, Y, and Z. It's not just hiding the symptoms. So this is very unique when it comes to Ayurveda. There's also the unique aspect of the interconnectivity of the body when it comes to holistic practices, right? The dysfunction is not localized to a certain area or a certain organ. Vaidyas, doctors, are trained to look at the whole picture, right? Everything that is occurring is currently contributing to the state of dysfunction, the state meaning also our mental state, emotional state, our physical state. All of these things will converge and create signs and symptoms around the body. So Ayurveda will analyze and interconnect the whole, connect the dots. Emotions connected to physical, digestion connected to sleep, right? It's not localized. And this connection is something that, again, I was really, and I'm still very drawn to. Now I cannot help but see life through the lens of holism, through the lens of everything being connected. And there's an inquiry, there's a fascination, there's a whoa. Versus something that my Ayurvedic doctor pointed out, how the Western system works. Can be seen like that story. There was an old lady who swallowed a fly. So she swallowed a fly, and so she swallowed the spider to catch the fly. She swallowed the duck or chicken to catch the spider. She swallowed a dog to catch the chicken. She swallowed a horse to catch the dog, and then she passed. Constantly taking something to swallow, to alleviate the other thing doesn't end well. It's consumption, it's consumerism, it's excess. And Ayurveda tells us it's centered around holism. If we take too much, it's not going to work. So I want to read one more shloka around these core principles of Ayurveda, the goals of a human life. So again, this is from Charaka Samhita, Sutrasthana, Volume 1, Chapter 1, the core principles. And the shloka goes, Dharmartha kama mokshanam arogyam mulam uttamam rogastasya bharatara shreyaso jivatasya cha. And said with poetic meters, Dharmartha kama mokshanam arogyam mulam uttamam rogastasya bharatara shreyaso jivatasya cha. Makes it much easier to memorize. Song, music. So the shloka says that the complete absence of disease, or arogyam, is the best or ultimate way to achieve, which is mulam uttamam, to achieve one's duty, one's obligation, or act which one is born in responsibility to, this individual responsibility, that's dharma. And anything produced, material gain, as a result of effort, often from that duty, that dharma, or that which someone works for, that's artha. And the best way to achieve kama, or enjoyment of pleasure, especially enjoying the fruits of one's labor. And the best and ultimate way to achieve moksha, which is the emancipation or the liberation of all worldly duties, all human duties, setting us free. This transmigration, moksha, this ascension, this release from the cycle of reincarnation. And cha, that which takes away or removes, eradicates disease, i.e. Ayurveda, rogastasya paratara, creates the best possible life. Shreyaso jivatasya cha. Creates the best possible life. So complete absence of disease is the best and ultimate way to achieve one's life goals, one's human life goals, which are our duties, our obligations, that which I'm born into, and also the receiving of a thing, material gain, results of my effort, that which I work for, receiving wealth from that. And then enjoyment of those things that I desire, my pleasures, especially what I've worked for. And the liberation from worldly duties, setting free. And that which takes away disease creates the best possible life because I can achieve those duties, those goals. And so if one is looking for an Ayurvedic doctor, if someone is looking for an Ayurvedic support, just to understand a little bit about the prerequisites in India, an Ayurvedic doctor, the first stage is to achieve BAMS, Bachelor of Ayurvedic Medicine and Surgery. This includes 4.5 years of study and 1 year of internship or residency, so that's 5.5 years. However, unlike in the US, after you complete your 4 years and your internship or residency, then you can get the MD title. You cannot get the MD title until an additional 3 years after. Okay, so that's about 8.5 years to get the MD title in Ayurveda, and then to PhD is an additional 3 to 6 years. That means a BAMS, Bachelor of Ayurvedic Medicine and Surgery, accredited Vaidya is able to practice medicine in India, not in the US, and they're not allowed to have the MD title, but they have the same amount of schooling as someone with an MD title in the US. And these Ayurvedic physicians, these Vaidyas, are trained in Ayurveda and biomedical science. Biomedical science or biomedicine is a field of scientific inquiry. So this is the understanding of biology, of physics, of chemistry, that which we understand in conventional medicine. So one thing that's come out of biomedicine is conventional or modern medicine, but biomedicine is not modern medicine, okay? But that means Ayurvedic doctors need to understand biomedicine. They need to understand biology, physics, chemistry, all that a doctor in the US does, and the Ayurvedic holistic principles. So we have these thousands of years of testing, of study, of doctors seeing families for generations, the same family for generations, and understanding patterns and understanding how they work and attuned to nature and the seasons. And this is all within the practice of Ayurveda. And it's very important to know that Ayurveda is not legally recognized as a medical healthcare system in the US, unlike in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia, Ayurveda is a medical healthcare practice, but it is illegal for an Ayurvedic doctor to claim or diagnose or treat or cure anything understood in a Western medical condition or context. However, Germany and Switzerland are exceptions, which is very interesting. If an Ayurvedic doctor is operating in Germany or Switzerland, they can make a number of claims on Ayurvedic scientific evidence. So they can practice there. And in India, of course, Ayurvedic physicians are fully authorized to make diagnosing treatments and claims within the legal framework. So why is this? Why is Ayurveda not legally recognized in the US? Well, a couple of reasons. One, there's the understanding that, yes, a lot of Ayurvedic doctors are trained to support Indians living in India, right? So there's a lack of expertise around Western needs in some cases, right? There's just a limiting rate of understanding recognition of as a medical system in this Western climate, because Ayurveda is so rooted also in understanding your environment and how the environment creates causes and effects, right? So that's one piece, which is why I always speak to my Ayurvedic physician, Jessica Villella, because she is the second American-born citizen to achieve BAMS, Bachelor of Ayurvedic Medicine and Surgery, in India properly. She had her own private practice in India, and she's the first American-born woman to achieve BAMS. And so she has an incredible understanding of how Westerners can digest, can receive Ayurveda, and what shifts and changes need to be made in a globalized perspective. Another reason why Ayurveda is illegal in the US is just generally the pharmaceutical monopoly, right? The dominant pharmaceutical-driven healthcare system in the West creates very strict barriers to entry, very hard barriers to entry for a holistic medical system like Ayurveda. Right? Holistic practices are hard to push because then it will essentially push out consumerism, reductionism approaches, which has a foundation in pharmaceuticals. Right? So that's the reality. But we're hopeful. We are hopeful. I am hopeful. Things are breaking down because they don't work. So essentially, we're going to have to come back to a system or move forward with a system that does work. Get curious about something more whole and sustainable. You know? Practical guidance for exploration. What would it look like for you if you wanted to choose an Ayurvedic practitioner and set realistic expectations for healing? This is always a big question when I work with people and when people work with my Ayurvedic doctor. How long is it going to take to heal? What a question. And it's a fair and valid question. I get it. We want to know when things are going to get better, when things are really painful. I know I had the same question a couple times throughout the years. So what could it look like if you are dealing with something that you want to get some support around from an Ayurvedic practitioner? Again, this is not giving medical advice, and always consult with your healthcare provider and doctor before making any changes. But the suggestion I have, if you're looking for an Ayurvedic doctor, find someone who is at least BAMS certified, Bachelor of Ayurvedic Medicine and Surgery certified, and know how long have they been practicing. Who do they usually practice with or on? Do they live in the same region as you? Do they have similar background, heritage as you? Do they have similar challenges and dysfunctions as you? Is it something that they're used to working with? So ask all of these questions. If your signs and symptoms are in a more chronic state, meaning there's not a lot of rhyme, not a lot of reason, there's not a predictability around it. It seems like things are just coming out of nowhere. I would definitely look for an Ayurvedic doctor. And I will always suggest, I get no commission or anything like this if I recommend my Ayurvedic doctor. But Jessica Villela is incredible, and I have her information linked in the show notes. If you're looking for more lifestyle changes, behavioral changes, habit shifts, this is where an Ayurvedic health coach or a Swastha Acharya like myself can come in handy. I want to be very clear. There's no such thing as a Swastha Acharya in India. A Swastha Acharya, or an Ayurvedic health coach, was designed for Westerners to help bridge the gap that's needed in integrating a system from India, a holistic healthcare system that doesn't exist in our own paradigm, or is currently getting integrated into our own paradigm. So an Ayurvedic health coach helps with those behavioral changes and understands the structures of Ayurveda. We understand the principles, what works and what doesn't work, and helps to make a daily routine attuned to what you need in your environment that's going to, over time, create health, sustainability, longevity, and hopefully achieve your life goals. And if it's required to partner with an Ayurvedic physician, a proper Ayurvedic health coach will know their scope. That's another thing. Make sure you're very clear, and they are very clear on what their scope is. Ayurveda has been a breeding ground for what they say in Charaka Samhita, quacks. Quacks, people who say that they practice this medicine, people who say that they practice Ayurveda, but they're really not. Because again, there's this remembrance that we have. It's all innate within us. But to say that I can take someone's health into my own hands, or I can support someone in their health, is a really big claim, and not something that I'm claiming here. I'm not giving medical advice. Okay? But to say that, it's been from the beginning of time, Ayurveda has been a victim of quackery. So be very discerning. The people that you work with, the health coaches that you work with, use your gut intuition, ask the questions, and let them show you, tell you in their way of being and in their delivery and their testimonials, all the things, and their referrals and their willingness to give sources. That's how you can discern, some ways you can discern. So yes, I am an Ayurvedic health coach. I'm a Swastha Acharya. I'm very clear on what my scope is. I love to support people who want to break through those habits, those deeply rooted habits, and shift into a more holistic way of being. And yes, I do partner with an Ayurvedic doctor when it's necessary. And I'm going to be very clear if I think I can support you or if not. I think we need partnerships. And I'll give you all the materials, tools that I possibly can. And then there's setting realistic expectations for healing. And when I say healing, I mean ing. There's no being healed, I believe. There's a constant evolution as humans to keep learning, to keep growing. And there's fluctuation, breath. And that's what healing is, like condensing the time from pain into purpose, or suffering into acceptance and ease. So in terms of treatment and duration, if you are to work with an Ayurvedic practitioner, an Ayurvedic doctor, then it needs to be understood that the time it takes is going to be based on many different factors. The initial state or the degree of the dysfunction that we come with. It's going to depend on the chronicity, how much recovery time is needed for our body, for our tissues to regenerate. How long have the symptoms been active? If I was born with eczema, born with chronic eczema, and I'm working on regenerating my body and changing my microbiome, this is going to take some time. So for me, I would say about 3 full years of a completely different lifestyle. Not to say that's what someone else is going to experience, but that's what my experience was. And there's also like generally a just learning curve. How long does it take for someone to observe oneself? That's going to also be based on how much time and effort I can put into a new way of being, into enhancing and increasing my agency and my ability to make changes, right? So this process can be as slow or as quick as we we want to, as we can go, as our environment and our social constructs allow for, right? So it is going to vary from person to person. And so this is important to take into account. There is not going to be a specific timeline. If we're open to Ayurveda, if we're open to a holistic practice, welcome to our whole life changing, forever learning and growing. And so there's also this integrated timeline, right? This integrated timeline where I get to see myself, my changes, my needs throughout the seasons. Because what I need in the summertime and how long it's going to take for me to make the changes I need to make in, say, the summertime is going to be different from the winter, from fall to winter to spring. So to be able to see myself through these different stages with a higher level of awareness than I was before practicing holism is really going to also be a part of me embodying this new way of being. And thus, my recommendation, if you are going to dive into a holistic healthcare system like Ayurveda, is to focus on the process. Get interested on the process much more than the outcomes. If we focus on the process itself, yes, that cheesy follow the journey, which I know it's annoying to hear. But if I focus on the process, then I get curious. I get curious about my experience in breathing and smelling in the morning and the day. I get curious about the process of feeling the texture of my clothes and the bed sheets on my skin, whether it's it feels nice that it's cotton on an inflamed skin or if it's synthetic. I get to be curious about the process of, it felt different yesterday than today. I get to be focused more on what it feels like to get out of the shower and what my body wants to do with that in a state of health or in a state of disease. And that curiosity of everything that comes in between in a sensational life. Get curious about the process over the outcomes. And then utilize the seasons as a way to take stock of that process, of the progress. So another practical step for self-reflection, self-tracking would be to tune in to the season that you're in. Summertime, right now, currently when this comes out, in the Northern Hemisphere. Summertime, okay, how am I relating to the summer? What is it that my body needs? Can I reflect, if the sun is really high and strong, does it make me tired? And what kind of movements are most supportive for me when I'm in peak summer? Self-reflect on what are the things that are growing right now in my certain region in this certain season. And how does it feel in my body? How does it feel when I cook it this way and when I cook it that way? Self-reflect on, are my signs and symptoms chronic? Do they change day to day? Do I have a rhythm to it? And add that to your little journal or big journals. Now, to close, rebuilding a holistic medical healthcare system and what that could look like. How can we do this? I don't have the answers. I don't have all the answers, but I'm in the inquiry with you, and I'd love for us to inquire together. And if we're going to rebuild this wisdom, or rather integrate it into the future, we get to advocate for medical pluralism. We get to notice if I am dogmatic about a certain way of being or eating or living, and get curious about, why am I so strongholding on this way of being? What if I can be a part of advocating for medical pluralism, or there being more access to different ways, lineages of thinking, ways of practice, and speak to that. Speak to that in your doctor's office. Speak to that whenever you can. And we support other indigenous healing systems. Can we support those who are doing it in a whole way, or at least attempting to do it in a whole way, in a fragmented system that we're in? So if you find other leaders, other people that are practicing holistic healthcare or practicing a holistic system of indigenous wisdom, support them, share what they have to say. Ask questions, engage with their content, engage with their information, And not to say that all indigenous content creators are doing it in a whole or good way or sustainable way, but get curious and support those that your gut feeling says, hey, there's something here. I want to learn more. And keep learning about reductionism versus holism. We'll talk about that more in another episode. But keep that inquiry going. Keep that conversation going. If someone in a doctor's office or someone at school or someone in the workplace has a very reductionist approach, has a very reduced way of thinking, saying this is the only way of being, this is what's right and everything else is wrong, it's not good, or it's not practical, or it's not valid unless it's supported by this certain Western scientific study. Like, those are reduced ideas. And just get curious, call that out. Oh, this is a reductionist approach. Okay, interesting. And also get curious about the holistic discussions, which often won't have a total end. There will be more inquiry, there will be more questions, there will be more connecting the dots. But we'll get into that more in another episode. Reductionism versus holism. And then practicing, this one's huge, practicing personal agency and discernment. Day to day, practicing our own personal agency and discernment is huge. It's huge in rebuilding holistic wisdom, in where we're going and where we want to be. And agency is that action, that intervention, the actual choosing, especially something that produces a particular effect that we intend, that we want. So having the action, the agency, the intervention. And this is what is going to get us to where we want to be, a holistic, sustainable way of being together. So it's agency that gets over barriers, that helps us with practice create a habit of right action. It's the practice of taking action, of intervening, of agency, that creates this learned realization that we can make any problem solvable, that there's always a way. And the discernment piece is this ability to judge well. Ayurveda does understand that having right judgment, right discernment is a huge pillar of health as well. It's a huge pillar of getting us to health and a sign of good health. So to be able to make wise judgments, insightful decisions, distinguish between truth and falsehood, right and wrong. Yeah. So this involves keen perception, being able to understand, learning sciences, maybe multiple, including this one if it turns you on. So there's this understanding, this learning, this humbling of, oh, I don't know everything, I get to learn more. And this creates this ability to grasp more subtle differences and make accurate judgment, accurate discernment. Right? So we also have better discernment when our senses are clear. And we'll get into that discussion of our senses in another episode. But our senses, utilizing and practicing tuning into our sensory body, our sense of sight, our sense of smell, our sense of taste, our hearing, our listening, our sense of touch, attuning to those so we're not numb and we can discern. Okay? This is so powerful and important, not just for ourself and our healing, but for collective healing, collective liberation, collective care, sustainability. Come on. There's a lot of false information or information that's skewing towards a certain way to try to keep certain systems functioning and certain people and places sick for money, for consumerism, for a capitalistic model, meaning money is the most important thing, the most important measure of success. Which doesn't have to be the case, and it hasn't been the case for most of human existence. We know how to exist in other ways. Now, how to navigate different medical approaches. How would we start to integrate these worlds? Well, of course, this current modern world does come with the need for Western medicines, but just to be open about integrating these approaches is an amazing place to start when we can take, okay, if I have to go a Western route for something that requires symptom management right now, I'm really need to lean into that, then can I also start making some foundational changes based on a holistic principle? Maybe it's Ayurveda, maybe it's TCM, and another body of wisdom, some other indigenous practice. But if I make changes in my day-to-day, then the outcome of what happens after I have this Western medical treatment or Western medicine will also change, because I'm changing my inputs and my way of being day-to-day. So the principles of living, of food, of connection, of those foundational principles we talked about before. Healthy routines, sustainable routines, a drumbeat, circadian rhythms of the day, basic principles of nutrition and portion size and processing types. Rest, how's my rest and my sleep? Am I regulating my temperature with wearing the right clothes? Aligning my physical activities with my energy levels and the seasons. We'll talk about that in another episode as well. My mental activity, am I learning how to harness my mental activity so it's not causing so much leak and a waste of energy by overthinking all the time? So if I'm making some changes in these foundational areas while going through a Western approach, then once the numbing of the signs and symptoms goes away, maybe there's a baseline change that happens. And that's one way we can approach integration. And also get a buddy, connect with people who are also interested in holism, who want to have some skin in the game and support of making these changes. These behavioral changes are not easy. They're not easy, but they're much easier when doing it with someone. And that's where I come in as a health coach, but also as a homie. As a homie. So find your people. So I encourage us to inquire, to continue our self-reflections, to step into that practice of getting curious about your body, your sensations, about your energy levels, about what you consume. Get a journal, get a buddy. Reach out if you're looking for a health coach. I can always also share all the resources that I have and start to build a language with your body, with your signs and symptoms of the day, with the rhythms of, when I have a bowel movement, when I don't, what could have happened in between that shift. Find others that are interested in these kinds of holistic conversations and be discerning with those groups that you're in, right? Find those spaces around you. Start those questions. Have you heard of holism? Have you heard of Ayurveda? Have you heard of holistic healthcare? What do you do about that? Just have these conversations and feel into how deep you want to go with people. Take your time, but also just start. Just start to have those conversations. What spaces around me do I feel supported in living this way? Certain people, certain environments, where do I feel called and feel safe to have these kinds of conversations, discussions? Just get interested, continue to inquire. And if you want to connect with me on social media right now, it's VeronicaPage_G. There in my link tree, and the link tree that's linked below has my information. You can chop it up about holism. You can join the current WhatsApp group, which is going to switch off of Meta at some point. You can comment below and see if you can connect with people. Start having conversations about holism. Just begin that practice of medical pluralism, that there is more. Be in the inquiry. And if it feels constricting, if it feels scary, if it feels tight, like, I don't want to think of more than reductionism, I want to take a pill and then be done. Okay, get curious about that as well. How does that help you in the long term? Just get curious. Why do I prefer that way? And is this the way I do all things in my life? just curious. I send you so much love. I would love to hear any questions, any reflections around what is Ayurveda and how we start to utilize Ayurveda. This is just the beginning. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And again, I'm in the inquiry with you, continuing to learn with you. Next time, we're going to talk more about what Sattva is. The name of this podcast, as of now, unless it changes, let's be real, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. But as of now, this show is called Sword of Sattva. So what does Sattva have to do with Ayurveda? What is the Sanskrit term, Sattva? And how does it relate to living a holistic way? And why sort of? Why just kind of Sattva? Little hint, Sattva is one of the doshas of the mind. So we'll get into that more. Until then, I welcome all conversations, questions, inquiries, and I love you, and I want to hear more of what you want to learn more about, what landed for you here. I love you, I love you, I love you. I truly, truly do. Thank you for your interest in holism, and I'll talk to you on the next one.